morning, everybody. It is the oldest monument on the list of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It is also the only one that is still standing. This was stated in an article called The Great Pyramid of Giza. So since the Great Pyramid is built by my ancestors in my country, I have an interesting fact that I want to share with you today. So I'm sure that most of you would like to know more about the oldest monument on the planet. So today I'm going to talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza, Khufu. And I'm going to talk about the three W's. The three W's. I'm going to talk about the three W's of the Great Pyramid, which is when, where, and why the pyramid was built. So first of all, I'm going to start with when. The Great Pyramid was built in 2580, which is about 4,595 years ago. And it was built by 2.3 million blocks. And the weight of the block is about 5.5 tons, the average weight. And the total weight is 6.5 million tons. So according to a Pyramid of Giza article, this giant structure was built in 20 years, and 100,000 people worked on it. And by the way, the wheel was not invented at this time. People used wooden sleds to put the blocks on it and to move it from one place to another. And the rulers at this time was King Khufu. That's why the pyramid is called Khufu. And he was a pharaoh, not a ruler. And the architects are Immuno and Imhotep. So now we're going to move to the second W, which is where the pyramid was built. So for the geographical setting, the pyramid is located in Egypt, and the city is called Giza. That's why it's called the Great Pyramid of Giza. You get the Giza next to the star. And for the strategic setting, so the blocks were placed in a place called Luxor, which is down here in South Egypt, and the pyramid was up there. So the distance is about 400 miles. So the King Khufu chose this place because it was close to the Nile River, which was easy for the workers to build the blocks on boats and to ship it through the Nile. So here the Nile was reached to Egypt, and they took the blocks from here to here. And another thing, the pyramid is placed in a certain place. The best light enters to the tomb to enter the pyramid in a certain day in the year. And for religion, the pyramid is placed in a certain place that points directly to a star in the sun. Because ancient Egyptians thought when the king dies, the sun is going to move to another star. And they also believed in magic. So, and the third W we have is why the Great Pyramid was built. So mainly this giant building is built as a tomb for the king. It has a room, and this room has the tomb. And at this time people believed in afterlife, which is there is another life after death. So so King Khufu ordered his workers to do a high building to be close to the sky, in order when he dies he can move easily to the sky or to another star. And also there is a room over there. It's the gallery of the king, and this gallery has the goods of the king like gold and silver and water, because if he came back he can find his stuff and take it over there. So now I've talked about where and when the Great Pyramid was built, and I want to sum up with a quote by Stephen Gardner. He said, "The Egyptian contribution to architecture was more concerned with remembering the dead than the living." This means the pharaohs built this building. This building was built for the dead people. It was not built for the people to enjoy this scene. Yeah, and this is thank you in their language. Thank you.
Marco, what did you think?
Oh, I thought it was a really good speech. Like I liked the intro, and also I liked how throughout his speech he it was a pretty well. It seemed like he was prepared for it. Like he not only was informative, but also like very clever in the way like he would present how he was snapping with magic and the next slide up here. I thought it was clever, and just like he it seemed awesome, like he knew he was like what he was talking about. So it was really well done out.
Okay. Well, I think there's several things about the speech that are very successful, and then there's some things that need a little bit of work. I like the opening, the attention device and the topic identification I thought were very good. You've got a clear statement of what you're talking about. You've got kind of a cute, clever little preview visual that you throw in there, the M's rolling over to become the W's, and then you've got a pointer that's pointing at them. Probably a little more than necessary, but in the body of the speech, it makes those transitions easy for everybody to pick out. I think you want to remind us also about which W we're looking at each point, and if you're going to have a visual reference to the three W's, might as well have a visual reference to what each W represents as well. So the setup is pretty solid. It's an important subject historically, like you mentioned in the attention device. It's one of the only remaining wonders of the ancient world it is the only remaining wonder of the ancient world that is still there. That's, I think, impressive, and so it gives us a little bit of justification for talking about that. I did hear you use some supporting material in the presentation. I think you could have been a little bit more consistent about that. I did like the quote that you had at the end, though. I thought that was good, and the interpretation that you had on it is also good, but it's a good example of something that's missing in the speech, and that is that you've got this quote here, and you've got an interpretation for it, but you haven't really set up the story. In other words, that the architecture is not really designed for the living, it's really a tomb for people. And that's why we, don't necessarily appreciate it the way that others might have appreciated it, or why the intricacies of the construction are so unique, because they weren't really designed for the rest of the world to know about and see. In fact, there were secrets or things that weren't supposed to be revealed in that process. And to me, there's a little bit of a mystery. It's an interesting perspective, but you don't really talk about that. From an architectural perspective, you mentioned the two architects, but that's about all we hear about, why it was the way it was, except for the fact that it's tall. And we know that there's a connection. There are two other pyramids that you've got in those images there, and we had no explanation about what are they doing there and how do they match up with the Great Pyramid that you were talking about. That seems like there's a little bit of context missing. It's not that the information that you had in the speech isn't useful. I think it is useful, but it's often just information instead of giving us an explanation or a story about it or doing something to make it interesting. It's sort of like we're getting we're reading the cards in the museum. You know what I'm talking about? You go through the museum and here's a little card that talks about this thing, and here's the next card and here's the next card, and there needs to be something that kind of holds those together and makes you the person that we are listening to, and not just the data here. I mean, everything that you've got there is stuff that you get out of a short book, a brochure, really, because you don't have a huge amount of information. You've got some good basic information, but you need to make it kind of interesting to us and pull us in a little bit more. And that's where I think that it's lacking a little bit. The visuals, I think, are introduced pretty effectively. You showed them well. I think that we probably need another shot of the Great Pyramid in another spot so that we could do some comparisons, like when you've got that 5.5 ton block that you're talking about, and then we can go back and look at the pyramid and see, how many of these blocks is this really composed of, and you can get some sense of what a huge task this must have been, especially in the day when the wheel didn't exist and people were operating with less than a fulcrum trying to get things done. And there's so much kind of hidden stuff here that goes on. You got a 400-mile journey up the river to move each block, and you'd have to figure out what the time on that was and how complicated that was and all those sorts of things. So it just feels like you've got a lot of good information here. I think if you went through the whole thing, there's nothing I would take out, but there's stuff that I think you'd add and fill it in a little bit more. All right, thank you.